welcome back. This is segment 2 of session 3, Scope of Work. Now, when we talk about scope of work, we want to really focus in on the pieces and the elements that you're going to be writing as you're developing your scholarly publication or your manuscript. I like to begin with a quote, as you may have noticed. The secret of all victory lies in the organization of the non-obvious. I think a lot of what we do when we're planning and organizing and developing our scope of work in terms of our scholarly writing is non-obvious to a lot of folks. They don't really see necessarily the value, but they can appreciate the outcome. This quote, of course, from Marcus Aurelius, and talking about true victory in battle, but I think we can take this analogy and use it in scholarly writing and publication as well. So how do you focus on scientific rigor and transparency? Rigor and transparency are very big terms today that are being used a lot with our sponsors as well as with our journals. So what are some ways or some elements that you can include in your publication that demonstrate its rigor as well as its transparency? Take a second and think about this. Hopefully you did more than just think. You maybe wrote something down to go with that. There's also the idea of innovation, that your idea needs to be unique or novel, important, new, different, big. All of these terms, buzzwords for today, are important. It's what journals want to see. It's what sponsors want to see when they're making funding determinations. So think these things through as you're doing your scope of work. Where are the places that you can show your rigor? Where are the places that you can show your transparency? Where are the places you can be innovative? And state how you're being innovative. Just don't hope that someone will figure it out. You probably are going to need to be pretty blatant in how you say it. So let's look at the anatomy of an article. Hopefully, if you've been reading journal articles, if you're familiar with them, if you've already written some, you already have a good idea of what the anatomy of an article is. But I want to be sure that you understand that you don't have to write this in a linear form. Hardly anyone does. Sometimes the title is the very last thing, or usually the abstract. People are saving until the very end, until they've written it all, then they know what to write in the abstract. Certainly with authors, you want to include the affiliation of the authors, and in the introduction is where you're going to embed the literature review. The methodology is going to talk about exactly what you did, and a lot of folks tend to write the methodology section first because they feel like they have the clearest grasp on what was done and how they did it. So that once they get the methodology and they've somehow got the literature review done a little bit, they can polish up the introduction at the end. The results section is very straightforward because it's just based on the actual data that you've collected. It's the discussion section where you really want to embed that rigor, that transparency, that innovation piece. And then lastly, the references is something hopefully you've been building all the way through the process. So this is one way of looking at the anatomy of a typical article. Another way that a lot of folks use is this mnemonic device that's called IMRAD. And IMRAD basically stands for Introduction, Methods, Research, and Discussion. IMRAD. Very much the same thing that we saw in the previous illustration. Let me go back here. These same elements. This is a lot to remember. IMRAD is a little shorter. It's just 4 things: introduction, methods, research, and discussion. So embedded within these different components, it takes out the title, the authors, the abstract, probably things that you're already going to be thinking of anyway. You don't really need an acronym or a mnemonic device to help you with that. But this is a nice, helpful way to remember the pieces. So what I want you to do now is take a few minutes in your groups and look at these individual pieces based on the article that you've selected to write. What is this going to look like for you? How in-depth is it going to be? What percentage of your manuscript is going to be introduction versus methods versus research versus discussion? How are those percentages going to break out, and does that vary across disciplines? Does it vary by the type of article that you're writing? How does it vary? So talk about that, think about that, and maybe do a little pie chart for yourself that shows approximately how much of each piece is it going to take. And then on your own, write down how you're going to attack this. What's your battle plan? What's your attack? How are you going to get victory like Marcus Aurelius? mentioned in accomplishing your goals. As always, please feel free to reach out to me. I'm happy to help you in any way that I can. And good luck with your publication.